Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this discussion. And we are very pleased and honored to have with us Mr. Josep Borrell, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Policy and Security. And we are sure this chat with him will be very interesting with so many issues on the table these days. Joining me in this talk will be Ms. Maha Yahia, the director of the Carnegie Institute Middle East Center. And I would just like to start with Mr. Borrell. As a journalist, I'm Riccardo Chartreux. I'm a deputy director for RAI, for Italian television. And being a journalist, I would just like to start, Mr. Borrell, from today's news, because Pope Francis is in Greece and he's been in Cyprus, and tomorrow he'll be in Lesbos for the border of Europe.
Who?
Pope Francis.
The Pope.
The Pope, the Pope. And the Pope has had in these last 24 hours some very strong words, and I would say maybe some of his strongest words on Europe and on the mission of Europe, on the destiny of migrants, on the lives of these people, and on the and what goes at the core of the European belief in human rights, democracy, and liberty. And if we look today at the borders of Europe, when I think of foreign policy in a way starts at the borders. You know, it's what is after the borders. If we look at the borders of Europe today, Eastern Mediterranean, Lesbos, the South Mediterranean in front of Italy and Spain, Eastern Europe, Belarus, even the Channel, our border with the UK. In all these borders, we see the tragedy unfolding of migrants. I think this is one issue that goes at the core of what we as Europeans are and want to be. And I would like to ask you, is there a future in which we can imagine some initiative to solve this problem, not from behind the borders, you know, in terms of police or rescue or humanitarian aid, but there is a way to address this big issue that's facing Europe right now?
As you say, migration is a big issue, a multifaceted issue, and migration has to be regulated. What we cannot afford is the perception that migration is a flow that nobody controls, where some people are taking economic advantage because they are the professional of smuggling people, like it has happened in Belarus, and others risk their lives, in some cases being cheated by the possibilities of jumping over a border. All states have the responsibility of protecting their border. And citizens in Europe are afraid because they look at the migration as a phenomenon which looks uncontrolled. So we need migrants in Europe. Some member states will refuse this idea, but in general, we are in a demographic winter in Europe, and we need some people coming from outside. But it has to be done in a regulated and organized way. And this requires a common asylum and migration policy. And I have to say, I'm sorry for that, that member states has been unable to agree on a common, this part of the foreign policy that is related with the relationship with people willing to go to your territory. Since the time of Tampere in Finland, until these last days, with a proposal made by the Commission, which has not been accepted yet by the member states. This is a big obstacle. You know, when you abolish the internal borders among several countries, the external border of any one of them becomes the common external border of all of us, all of them. That's what has happened in Europe. We abolish internal borders, but we don't agree on how to manage external borders. So the first thing to do is to have a common understanding among us about how to treat with migrants and asylum seekers. There are two different categories. If there are two different categories, we have to distinguish among them. Don't be hypocritical. Are there two different categories, yes or not? Yes, they are. An asylum seeker is an asylum seeker, and not everybody is an asylum seeker. So we have to make the difference between them. And this requires a procedure. This requires to study who is who, and to treat each one in a different way. And this is a difficult, complex problem, which is being exacerbated by some events like the one in Belarus, where you see a regime, a government who is picking up people around the world telling them story that come with me, I will bring you to Europe, putting them at risk, creating a humanitarian crisis, and representing a threat to the borders of sovereign states. This cannot be afforded at all. It's just weaponizing human beings.
Thanks, Mr. Borrell. And please, Maha, go ahead.
Your Excellency, it's wonderful to be with you on the same platform again. I'll speak with a louder voice, yes. Just changing topics, but still on a common position. We see a changing geopolitical dynamics changing in the Gulf region. There is a United States realignment of its strategic priorities. And yet the EU, and with significant repercussions for the entire region, as we're seeing, trouble spots emerging around the region, shifting dynamics, relationships between different countries. My question to you is, will there be an EU strategy for dealing with the Gulf region, for dealing with the Middle East in general, or not?
Well, yes, it will.
What will it look like?
You cannot pretend me to tell you, no, it's not going to be
of course.
a strategy. No? Yes, it's going to be, and we are working on it. You know, the strategies in the European Union have a lot. And the word strategy is being widely used in the European Union because everybody requires a strategy, and we have one strategy for every problem. For the Gulf region, we don't have one yet. We are working on it because the Gulf region is becoming more and more strategic for us with a big security issue concerns. The most important one, if I can say about it, because I am working on it, is the JCPOA, the nuclear deal.
Well, since we are on the JCPOA, may I just do a follow-up question? We just saw what happened in Vienna. Everybody's gone home. Supposedly, we may meet again. You may meet again on next week, but it looks very unlikely. Meanwhile, we're hearing that
no, they will come back next week.
They will come back next week, but this is coming on the heels of maximalist positions, from what we understand, by Iran. Apparently, an increasing in the enrichment activities. Where do you see this going? And should there not be a JCPOA? What does that mean, not only for the region, but for Europe and also for global security?
Yeah, I understand that for the media, the interesting thing is what would happen if such a thing doesn't happen? My job is to try not to have to answer this question.
Okay.
And we are, me and my team as coordinators of the JCPOA, very much engaged on trying to save this agreement. Just true, the negotiators decided to go back to their capitals during the weekend, but they have the commitments of the Iranians that they will come immediately on Monday, Tuesday. They will be in Vienna again. So let's believe it. Secondly, about this figure of 90% enrichment in uranium.
60, we heard.
No, the figure has been on
90.
Those days 90, which would be certainly 90 would be quite a worrisome figure because nobody enriches uranium to 90% and unless there is for a military purpose. But the Iranians deny it. Personally, the foreign minister of Iran says that that's not true. So let's bring people to the table again. Let's look with real figures. Don't work with a figure that doesn't represent reality. Let's see. For that we have the Atomic Energy Agency, and let's push for negotiation in a goodwill. There are two sides on the deal.
And the obstacles?
And
what are the obstacles then?
The
obstacles, the challenges.
Look, the JCPOA had two sides. It was not just a nuclear deal. It was a nuclear deal and an economic or trade deal. It was a desk. You stop developing the nuclear capacities and you are rewarded by having trade, free trade and economic rewards. President Trump withdrew unilaterally without taking very much care of the consequences. So let's recognize the fact. Until American withdrawal of the deal, the Iranians were fulfilling the deal. And it's widely recognized by the observer, which is the International Energy Atomics. Now, not only they withdraw, but they put sanctions. Now, if we want to go back to the deal, in order to make Iran to fulfill their nuclear obligations, it has also to be accompanied by lifting the sanctions and going back to the initial deal, which was presenting for Iran some reward. The problem is at which page, who does what first. But we cannot pretend Iran to go back to their nuclear obligations if on the other side there is not also a fulfillment of their part.
Mr. Borrell, let me come to another hot topic, very hot for us in Italy, but in general for Europe and the Mediterranean, that is Libya. We know that there are elections coming, and there's a hope that these elections bring about peace and stability in Libya, although it's very much hope and less certainty. Talking about Libya, it reminds me of a sentence by Mr. Staffan de Mistura when he was special envoy for Syria, said about Syria, if it's a proxy war, it takes a proxy peace. It takes that other people come together to bring around peace. Do you think it's possible to bring peace in Libya? And do you think it's possible that the Libyans themselves alone curb the power of armed groups that respond also to foreign actors? And or would there be a need for some external intervention to help them do so? And wouldn't the European Union would be the subject for such kind of help?
Well, external intervention in Libya has been quite a lot. I wouldn't say that the Libyans are alone. There are a lot of people from outside Libya, Russian, Turks, mercenaries from the South Africa. There are too many external actors. One of the things that the Libyans need is that these external actions leave the country. And this is part of the solution. And certainly for that, we need elections. For us, elections is not a marvelous magic wand that solves any problem, but it brings legitimacy. And in Libya, we need an interlocutor that has legitimacy recognized by the Libyan people. And the only way that we can get it is through elections. I know how difficult it is to run elections in a country with a strong divisions, East, West, military groups, in the middle of a war. Well, thank God for in the middle of a ceasefire. But it's not easy. None of the problems with which we are dealing are easy. But I think it's much better to run for these elections. If there is no election, then it will be a big question mark. If not elections, then what? How do we share resources? How do you approve a budget? How do you manage a country if you don't have a legitimate government? Because we're putting all our efforts and pressure, knowing the difficulties, knowing that this is not a magic wand for this election to take place. We are sending a set of technical observers. We are ready to send an electoral observation mission. We will support, we are supporting politically, financially, because I don't see which is a better solution. Yes, we can postpone it. There is always a good reason to postpone going to the dentist, no? Or to pass an exam. But you cannot postpone things forever.
Mr. Borrell, if I can take you back to the other side of
Sorry
the
for comparing elections with going to the dentist. Huh?
They're almost on the same, talking about Libya, almost on the same level.
I mean, it's a difficult exercise.
It's a difficult moment.
Today, going to the dentist, it's not so difficult. No?
Yeah, but it's always unpleasant.
Let me take you back to the other side of the Mediterranean, to Syria. If there's one country that brings together many of the themes we've talked about with you today, which is migration, Iran's, the other side of Iran's activities in the region, there's the JCPOA, there's the economic, but the missing part in the JCPOA, in the nuclear deal, is Iran's regional activities. Syria is a key area for Iran's regional activities, but also the seeming move to bring, to quote somebody recently, bring Syria back. to bring Syria back into the fold somehow, under the leadership of the current president, Bashar al-Assad. Where is the EU in all of this? I understand the impetus, I mean, the struggle being caught between wanting to provide humanitarian aid and yet having to, struggling with the moral implications of normalizing with a regime that has...
Well, it's quite easy. The situation in Syria, and with respect to Syria, is more or less the same that in Afghanistan. Someone won the war in Syria and in Afghanistan, but to win the war is not enough to be politically recognized. Okay. And we don't recognize politically, we don't want to increase our diplomatic, we don't want to upgrade our diplomatic relations or our reaching out with the Syrian regime of Assad. I know, because I've been talking with some Arab friends, that the Arab League is reconsidering the possibility of re-accepting Syria again among their ranks. Certainly, I am not going to tell to the Arab League what they have to do. Certainly not. But from our side, by the time being, I don't see any reason to change our stand, which doesn't prevent us from providing humanitarian help, either to Afghanistan or to Syria. We are doing that with the Syrian people outside Syria and inside Syria through the United Nations organizations. Look, some months ago, front pages of the newspapers were Idlib, 1 million people caught in a trap on the need of humanitarian support. Idlib has disappeared off the front pages of the newspapers, but it hasn't disappeared from the geography. These 1 million people are still there. And they survive thanks to the humanitarian help being carried through the Turkish border. Every day, 200 trucks bring food and everything, livelihood for these 1 million people. So yes, we continue helping Syrian people inside Syria and outside Syria. There are 6 million people out of Syria. Doesn't mean that we recognize the Assad government. That is not in our plans to do so. And on the same hand, we are going to provide humanitarian assistance to Afghan people without recognizing the Taliban government.
Let me go to another area of interest for Europe, that is Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, or in general Africa. There is this new European initiative, the gateway to Africa, the global gateway, I think. Global gateway. And it's been presented as a friendly and peaceful competition with China in the continent. And what is its core, and what does it aim to achieve? What is the gateway to the global gateway to Africa for Europe?
It's a way of organizing our relationship with, I wouldn't say the rest of the world, but with our partners around the world, to provide a plan, resources, and partnership in order to develop the infrastructures of tomorrow. Look, in the recent days, we have just inaugurated a fiber cable that links Latin America with Europe from the coast of Brazil to Lisbon. This is a very important infrastructure, digital infrastructure. You don't see it, but use it. We are doing a lot supporting infrastructure building in many places of the world. What we want to do with this global gateway is to give a political sense to what we are doing and for what we are doing. And with the amount of resources that one can reasonably imagine that we could put on the table, putting together the resources of the European institutions, the member states, and the leverage capacity that we have with private and public financial institutions. And I think it's a very good idea to present things in an ordered way, in a strategic approach to what we are going to do in the next years. And the press has been presenting it as an answer to the Chinese road and belt. Well, it's an alternative. It's an alternative because for many people, the Chinese proposal has been interesting, but leading them to a high level of indebtedness that for some countries today, especially in Africa, looks unsustainable. We are not going to provide unsustainable debt for the people that partners with us. And yes, certainly China has been doing a lot of work and a lot of reach out and a lot of media work. I wouldn't use another word, in order to present them as one who builds in connectivity around the world. While we Europeans, we are also building connectivity around the world for good reasons. And that's what is the Global Gateway is about, putting together the capacities of the European institutions, the member states, and our financial institutions at the service of a better articulated interactivity in connectivity among countries, and putting especially emphasis on the invisible infrastructures, the digital infrastructures. One of the best ways of connecting people today is not just bridges and roads. It's a former public works minister who is talking, but through the digital infrastructures. And on that, we want to offer to our partners a good deal, which will be an alternative to other deals presented by other global actors.
Okay.
But don't see that in a confrontational way.
No, I said peaceful and friendly.
That's very good.
Question, yeah.
I buy your words.
Excellency, can I just turn to you with the last question? Any messages on Lebanon? There is the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Lebanon sitting right here.
We have been talking coffee together.
Yes. So any key messages on Lebanon in terms of what the government should be doing and what the EU could do more to help?
Well, we have been talking about what we have been doing for Lebanon. It's quite an important amount of financial support. I think the right figure, it's about 11 billion euros in the last 10 years. That's true. Half of that is to support the Syrian refugees, because certainly I have to praise Lebanon for the support they are offering to the Lebanese, to the Syrian refugees, and they need our support. And this support represents about half of the financial support to Lebanon. But 11 billion euros is quite an important amount of money. You know, I went in Lebanon last June to send a clear message. You have to deblock forming a government. If not, we are going to prepare sanctions against the ones who prevent the government from being formed. And we approve a legal framework to these sanctions. Thanks God, or whoever, it was not necessary, because finally the situation went deblocked and now Lebanon has a government. And the government has to deliver. It has to deliver in several fields. First of all, an agreement with the International Monetary Fund, which is a prerequisite for us to engage on a macro financial assistance that we are willing and ready to provide as far as Lebanon government gets an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Second, to speed up the investigation and the judiciary about the blast on the, which is not progressive. And third, to make the reforms, starting with the electricity sector. And fourth, to try to support the people in Lebanon who are in big distress, which is an important part of the population. For all of that, Lebanon can count on the European Union. We'll continue supporting Lebanon, both politically and financially, but we have to press the political class, the political responsibles in Lebanon to bring solutions to their people. No one else will do it. No one else will do it.
No one else should do it.
And we don't have a hidden agenda with Lebanon. We're there to support, to help. But we are not going to replace or substitute the political leadership of the government, the legitimate government of Lebanon. Sometimes people ask us to do things that we cannot do because we are no longer a colonial power and we don't want to become again.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you very much on behalf of my colleague and myself. Thank you for a very invigorating conversation. That's it. We're done.
You got 20 seconds if you want to say something more.
If you want, I have one more question if you like. The less for less, the question on the less for less proposal in the JCPOA.
Less for less.
Yes.
No, I want
you don't want to comment on that.
I want more for more. Thank you.
Thank you very much.